Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to share with you another little mini collection, and this is all decks that make my little gamer heart happy. So these are all decks that I actually associate with video games, and I think there's only one of them that actually is intended to relate to a video game. So we're going to take a look at a handful of decks here that I've accumulated, several of which I got around Christmas time, but these are all decks that I relate to very specific video games and very specific gaming sort of time periods in my life. So we're going to start with the first deck here, which is the Dungeons and Dragons Tarot, which, I mean, yes, is a video game. There are video games based on Dungeons and Dragons. Now, obviously, D&D is a role-playing game, and just in honor of all the gaming goodness, I have some of my D&D dice out here as well. This is the fairly new mass market Dungeons and Dragons Tarot. Here's the beautiful backs. I have edged mine in yellow to match the beautiful backs and the text on the cards. Now, this is the D&D Tarot, right? However, that's not what I associate this deck with, because I'm such a nerd. I actually associate this deck with the Dragon Age world. So there are three, I think at this point, Dragon Age games, the latest being the Inquisition, and I absolutely love that game. I love the world that it's in, and I have played all of them, and I've played all of them multiple times. The last game had an actual tarot deck in the game, and there was a real tarot deck that had come out called Dragon Age Inquisition Tarot. I do believe it was like a special edition thing that came out with the game. Had I known that at the time, I would have bought it, but I didn't, so I didn't get it, and it's ridiculously hard to find, and when you do find it, it is ridiculously priced. However, the art style of it looks very, very similar to what we see here in the Dungeons and Dragons Tarot. This also, like, there's a little bit of World of Warcraft vibe here, but I have a separate deck for that, so don't worry. We're going to get to that world as well. I really like the illustrations in this deck, and I think the associations that they have work really, really well for the tarot. And I think it also works really well for tapping into the Dungeons and Dragons world. But more specifically for me, and this is a very me thing, these are decks that I associate with games that I've played. This is a Dragon Age deck, and this illustration here in the Justice card is a very good example of why. This is the very similar art style that we see in the Dragon Age Tarot deck, as well as in the game itself. So, like, it's the art style of this deck that takes me into that world. Like most fantasy RPG style games, we do have a lot of the same characteristics that we see happen in the Dungeons and Dragons world. So I do love that the associations are actually like characteristics you would have both in D&D and in the game itself. So like there's strength, there's intelligence, there is wisdom, and charisma, which is fantastic. This is such a fun deck. I kind of got us all to the end. I haven't really read with it yet. Clearly, as you can see, that is still primarily in order. Let me try to skip around. But I have spent a lot of time looking at the deck. I've read the little guidebook. Obviously, I took the time to edge the entire deck, and now I'm ready to spend some time actually working with it. So I can't really tell you how it reads in terms of a tarot deck, but like in terms of what's going on in the artwork and what is listed on the card, like it totally makes sense to me. But really what this deck is about and why we're talking about it in this video is because it looks like it exists in the Dragon Age world. And for me, this kind of scratches the itch for wanting to have that Dragon Age Inquisition Tarot deck, which I don't ever seem to be able to find and can't afford even when I do. So this deck is, I was super excited when I saw it. I actually bought it for my youngest partner for Christmas, and then we were looking through it, and then I had a gift certificate for Amazon for Christmas. And so this, among a few other decks that we're going to see today, are what I spent that on. So it's such a fun deck, but it definitely gives me Dragon Age vibes. So that is why I attribute it to that particular video game. Looking through this, it just makes my heart happy. It not only does it, of course, relate to Dungeons and Dragons, and it makes me think about, the game that we play and, with the kids and stuff. It also makes me think about the, hours upon hours spent with my husband playing the Dragon Age games and being in that world. And you'll see that is a very consistent theme all throughout this video and all the decks that we're looking at. So before we move on to the other decks that really don't have anything to do with gaming or video games, let's talk about a deck real quick that is actually made to be a companion to the Dungeons and Dragons game. This is the deck of Many Fates and Many Things. I've combined mine into one deck. This is a deck that is meant to be used in your campaigns. However, I have been using it as an actual Oracle deck, which is a lot of fun, super cool. I'm actually working on a reading / kind of experience with this deck that I'm kind of pulling together into a particular thing. And maybe at some point, hopefully, I'll be able to articulate that into more concise words than just I'm doing this thing. But I do really love it as an Oracle deck because it's so different, so different than what we tend to see as in Oracle decks, right? So like the messages, because they're supposed to be used in a campaign, are completely different. But I think you can still use them in a divinatory sense. So this one says, a deity of the DM's choice demands you complete a trial of choosing. If you succeed, it will grant nearly any request. If you fail, you forfeit your soul. So like I have a whole way that I'm working with these messages, and I'll again hopefully be able to put that into something easier for me to explain once I get it completely fleshed out. But I think that would make a really cool Oracle message just in general. Like there's a choice that's going to be made, and like if you succeed, right, that's going to be great. You're going to get what you want. But if you fail, you're going to forfeit your soul. So in other words, like there's a choice to be made, and the price that you pay if the choice is wrong is really, really high. So maybe you might want to think twice about that choice in the first place, right? I just think it's super cool, and it's been a lot of fun. I have been working with it with several of the decks that we're going to look at today, but I did also just want to mention this one because it is an actual game-related deck. It is not meant to be used as an oracle, but I completely use it that way. It is meant to be used in your D&D campaigns. So now we're going to move along to a bunch of decks that have absolutely nothing to do with video games, but that I associate with video games. This is the Heavenly Bloom Tarot deck, which has, again, absolutely nothing to do with a video game or the video game world. It is a beautiful deck. It is rose gold gilded, and I'm unsure about whether or not this gilding will stay or not. It is beautiful. The backs are beautiful. It's quite long, so I do have a little bit of a hard time getting my hands around it. This deck for me is Final Fantasy. I absolutely love this artwork. It just takes me right into the Final Fantasy realm. That is a franchise and a game that my husband and I have played since the very first one came out. We've played them all. We've played Final Fantasy Online many, many times. And it just, whenever I get this deck out, it just feels like I'm just immersing myself in that world. The art style is very similar to the characters in that world. A lot of the figures that we see look like characters in that world. And so while this is like an absolutely beautiful tarot deck, it totally gives me Final Fantasy vibes. I mean, like, look at that. That's a Final Fantasy card. And I just think that is freaking amazing. I love it. It's such a great personal connection for me to have to this deck. Or really to any of these decks, right? Because what we're talking about is all my very personal connections that I have in worlds that I have spent a considerable amount of time in. I really love the suit association. So we have laurels here, which I think is the pentacles. We have wands. I do not know about this gilding because it keeps like catching on my hands. So that might have to go. But yeah, like the art style is just, it's so beautiful, and it's so like, just exists in that Final Fantasy world for me. I really, really love it. I think there has been, or there was, a Final Fantasy deck. Probably not licensed. I mean, I would imagine. Probably like a fan deck. But this to me just, yeah, the artwork, the people, the style of it, the world, the backgrounds that these characters are in, it just feels like I am immersing myself in this fantastic world, which is just so much fun. And again, like I have so many personal associations to these games, to these worlds, to the probably ridiculous amount of time I have spent within them, and, you know, hanging out with my husband and playing games and friends, and oh my goodness, like all of these online like RPGs. Like it's more than about just the game, right? It's then about the friends and the connections as well. I love this strength card. I mean, this feels like a character that would be in the Final Fantasy world. Yeah, this deck just makes me happy too. Like every single one of these decks, for the most part, could also be in like the good mood category. This one for sure would definitely be in there because of that very personal association that I have to the Final Fantasy world. So speaking of decks that have absolutely nothing to do with video games, but immerse me in a very specific video game world, this is the Horror Tarot. And this is a deck that I bought. It's kind of or she made me do it, because I had seen Orshi talk about this deck many times. And every time I saw it, I was like, there's something there with that deck. I really like the backs. I have edged mine. It's actually edged in black, but my copy is actually quite wonky. It came like weirdly split, and they don't really go back together very well, but that's okay. After I got it in hand, because I ordered it because I was like, or she talks about this deck and like, it's super cool. There's something there. I gotta see it in person. I love this card. And I went ahead and got it again for Christmas, and as soon as I got it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is Castlevania. That's what the connection is for me. That's what the draw is. And so every time I pull this out, I'm like, feel like I'm stepping into the Castlevania world. Again, Castlevania is another sort of game franchise that my husband and I have played together ever since it came out. Clearly, we've been gamers for a very long time, as some of these games were from a very long time ago. This deck in particular reminds me of Symphony of the Night, which is so funny because we actually just had done a replay of Symphony of the Night, and we're rewatching the TV show. So there is a cartoon, a Castlevania cartoon. It is definitely not for children. It is very bloody, and it definitely looks like this. This could be in the show. The art style is super similar to the art style in the TV show, and it does really feel like it exists in the world of the Castlevania story, which of course is about Dracula. And there are a few cards in here. There's like a creepy clown card that does not relate really to the Castlevania world, but for the most part, the rest of these do. And it just gives me all the happy feels. This is a deck that I feel like is very unfortunately named, because as soon as I saw the title of it, because I don't like horror things, I don't like to be scared, I don't watch horror movies, I didn't even look at the deck because of the title. And I feel like that was a turnoff, because I'm like, I don't want a horror deck. But that's not what this is to me. This is very much a Castlevania deck to me. I do feel like the borders are a bit ridiculous and overdone, and this text is like completely unreadable for me. It is it's like stamped foiling, so like if I catch it into the light, I can pretty much see it, but like it's so super shiny, and just sitting here looking at it from the angle that I'm at, which is the angle that I'm at whenever I'm working with my cards, I can't read it at all. So like that's a little bit of a bummer. And I think the borders really kind of detract from the artwork. I wish it would have just been less, or borderless would have been even better. But you know, I think that it's still like a super cool deck, and it just so takes me into that Castlevania world, you know, that Dracula world. But again, very specific to the Castlevania brand, because like the art style fits it. The mood of it fits it. Like this it just feels like it stepped right out of that video game and now it's in my hands, and that is like just the coolest thing. So moving along to more decks that have absolutely nothing to do with video games but that I associate with them, we have the White Numen, a Sacred Animal Tarot. And this deck I purchased again for Christmas. These boxes frustrate me to no end, so I need to make a bag because like this, what is this? This is ridiculous. I know that's a very me thing, so just ignore me. I'm not overly fond of the cardstock. It is very, very slippy and it's a little bit kind of plasticky, but I do not care because here's the beautiful backs. I absolutely adore this artwork, and to me this is a beautiful blend of just like a video game in a deck, because so many of these cards remind me of scenes or specific video games. I'll try to find, there's some very, very key cards in here that speak to that. Like this feels like many of the sort of fantasy role-playing games I've played. Some of them feel very much in the Final Fantasy world. There's one that's a Zelda card for me. There's one that relates to Animal Crossing. I'll see if we can find one, but like just whatever, for some reason, whatever it is about this deck, this art style, it just makes me have all the video game feels. This is my Animal Crossing card because it's like, the hermit has like a moose head. Like I'm pretty sure he's a moose, right? And that just, it makes me think of, oh my goodness, what is the moose's name in Animal Crossing? Somebody please let me know. I forget. It's one of Ash's favorite characters from the game, but these like feel very Final Fantasy to me. Here's the Zelda because there's a chicken, and as anybody who's played Zelda, like you throw the chickens. It's just what you do. You pick them up and you throw them, and it's a thing. And I just absolutely love this artwork. This for me is more of a, based on like the color tones and everything. It's really more of a, I think what's going to be a summer deck for me. It feels very much in that summer energy. It feels like kind of a bit bright for winter time. However, you know, maybe I might want to dip into it when the winters just get a bit too gloomy. And there's nothing to do with video games about this deck. Like I haven't even read the book. I have no idea what this deck is actually supposed to be about. It says the Sacred Animal Tarot, although I don't feel like animals appear in every card. Maybe I just haven't looked close enough. So I really don't know what the main theme running through this deck actually is. And I don't know what the creator would think of me associating this as a video game deck. But it's a great association for me because like it makes me happy. And these are really wonderful memories, time spent with my husband, my kids, my friends, you know, even on my own, just immersing myself in video game worlds. It's so much fun, and it has such great happy memories for me that having a deck that kind of just embodies that energy is fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to actually diving deeper and working with it like as it's supposed to be worked with. Just because it's, you know, I associate it with that particular thing doesn't mean that's how I'm going to work with it. It's just what comes to mind whenever I look at it, and I am excited to actually get to know it. But that association means that right off the bat, like I'm already kind of a little smitten with this deck, and that's just fabulous. Okay, real super quick, I'm just going to sneak in here the Disney villains. I'm sure y'all are sick of hearing me talk about this, but this deck I do actually not only relate to a video game, but totally use when I'm playing a video game. And this is the deck that reminds me of and that I use when I play Disney Dreamlight Valley. Try to remember to say the actual name because around here it is referred to as Disney Princess Mommy. Because when I very first started playing and I made my character, Kevin was like, the character you made looks like she would be the mom of a Disney princess because she's wearing mom boots and a mom sweater and she has a mom haircut. And what can I tell you? I'm a mom. And so it will forever be called Disney Princess Mommy in this house. However, the real name of it is Disney Dreamlight Valley. Like, I love this deck. Y'all know how much I love this deck. I'm ridiculous with this deck. It's still out on my table all the time, even several months later. I work with it almost daily. Even when I am not playing the game, I am working with this deck. And I use it a lot for with my blessing and a curse reading, and it's so much fun. So the next deck is the Modern Spellcasters Tarot, which is going to take us into the realm of World of Warcraft. Again, this is, well, I've edged it, but this is not a deck that relates to video games in any way, shape, or form. However, when I look at this deck, it gives me World of Warcraft vibes. I feel like the world that we're in this deck is like the world of Azeroth and all the different worlds within it. Like, this feels like, you know, Northrend. The eagle feels like one of the mounts that you might have, and like he's flying over, you know, the fields of Azeroth. And it's just like, I mean, this guy could be the Lich King. It's just, there's so much about this deck that just feels like it exists in that world for me. That is not how I actually work with the deck. I work with it in like the way that it's intended, right? As a tarot deck. This deck is one of my like tried and true readers. I really love the energy of it. There's a lot of symbolism in this deck as well. You'll see like runes and stuff. Sadly, the book does not go into any of that, but if you do your own research or you just happen to know about those additional symbols, then this deck actually has really, really rich layer to it. Like, this guy like looks like he could be, you know, from one of the humanoid but non-human races, which is super cool. And it's just like, I don't know, it just feels like it's in that world. And I spent decades, y'all, decades in this world. Kevin and I played together. We played with friends. It was back in the day of like LAN party where we would have a huge group of us that would like literally they would drag their computers, and this was like not many of us had laptops back then, drag their full PCs over to our house, and we'd create this huge like labyrinth of computers and spaces, and then we would make food, and it was this all day thing. Like, really, y'all, this is how big of a nerd I really am. I know some of you would be shocked, but it really is. And that is how we spent our Sundays, and we did raids and like the whole thing, y'all. And it was so much fun. It was all about the friends and getting together, and it was all done in person, which was fantastic. I mean, like, it was just so much fun. But okay, that's all my nerdy goodness. This deck has absolutely nothing to do with World of Warcraft, and I don't read it in that way. Like, I'll be perfectly honest. Like, I don't pick up this deck and go, let's do a reading from the characters of World of Warcraft. But I feel like I totally could, because I feel like this deck completely exists within that world, or like mirrors it in a way. And that's just, it's so cool. It's so fun. And I do love this deck. It's such a solid reader. So the next deck is actually an Oracle, and in full transparency, this deck was sent to me by Inside Edition for review, and I haven't really had a chance to do that yet, but I have been playing with it, and this is the Magic of Marvel Oracle deck. So this deck, just like in a very general sense, makes my nerd heart happy, because I have a personal connection to every single character within these cards, with the exception of one, and there's one that I can't stand and will be removing, but I have put him back in for right now. Like Rogue is one of my favorite characters in X-Men. Like, when I was into my young teenage years, I drew X-Men characters all the time in my sketchbooks. I was like obsessed with the X-Men world. But I have also played many of the sort of video game or superhero related games. I think there's been like some Lego ones, although those might be DC, but at any rate, this deck just kind of relates to that for me in a general sense, like video games based in the comic book world. But again, it also has like ties in multiple levels for me, because like this card, like Hela, that's from like my favorite Marvel movie, which is Ragnarok, which I think is the best one. Like Loki, I mean, clearly he's in the Marvel movies, but like he also has his own little TV show now. I mean, Lockjaw's so great, the Winter Soldier. I mean, every single character except for one. Jubilee is fabulous. Venom, right? Iron Man. I love that there's a Valkyrie. Hulk, Thor. This is the dude I'm going to be taking out because I cannot stand Howard the Duck. I did not like him back then. I do not like him now. So as soon as I'm done doing my due diligence with this deck, he's going, because like I don't even want to look at his stupid face. Thanos, Ghost Rider, Storm was my ultimate favorite X-Men. I loved her. This is the one that I don't know who this is, Squirrel Girl. So I'm gonna have to look that up because that one's completely unfamiliar to me. This also feels like a lot of the video games that I've played, just in that general kind of sci-fi-ish kind of world. Like Doctor Strange is cool. Like there's been a lot of video games that kind of exist in that same sort of spectrum. There's games like I really loved like the Mass Effect series as well. And some of these have a little bit more of that futuristic kind of give me you know, that kind of vibe with the Mass Effect. So yeah, it just feels like a lot of the video games that I've played over the years. And I just like, I know all these characters. And so like, it totally makes my heart happy. Not really a video game deck, just more of a kind of general superhero deck. It's got a really nice blend of some of the kind of old school kind of imagery and some of the newer stuff, because like the Hawkeye card, I think is like, that's the Hawkeye from the girl from the new TV show, where I assume they're like, you know, moving out the old generation of superheroes and bringing in the new. So like it does a really good job of blending those two things. And I've been enjoying working with it. So the last like video game world that I want to talk about is Skyrim. Now this is the Elder Scrolls Skyrim tarot deck. And like, I do have to say, that this to me, even though it says Skyrim, is not a Skyrim deck, and is just totally because of the artwork. Here's the backs. The art style of this deck is more in the sort of anime, in the sort of Final Fantasy kind of realm. It is very much a pip style deck. I was a little bit turned off of that at first, but actually it reads quite well for a pip deck. I do like the suits that they've chosen. So they have like lockpicks and voice, arms. I can't find another one, and spells. So you can definitely see like it's very kind of lazy pip, as we say. It's definitely not the worst lazy pip deck I own, and actually it reads pretty well. But to me, this is not a Skyrim deck. Like, I know it's supposed to exist in that world. I suppose I haven't read the guidebook. I've used this deck actually many times. I've not read the guidebook. I really don't need to. It's a pip style deck. I can read with that just fine. But this artwork does not speak to the Skyrim world for me. This exists more in the Final Fantasy realm. Even the coloration feels more in the Final Fantasy realm. These characters feel more like they exist in the Final Fantasy realm. And I think that's just because of the art style. It does kind of make me wonder if like whoever was in charge of this art style actually played Skyrim or Elder Scrolls. And I'm like real picky about this because like Skyrim is just the latest one. It's the 5th one. And I've played every single version of this Elder Scrolls, the whole entire campaign, world of it, campaign, that's a D&D term, each of the progression of the story of the Skyrim world. I've played them all since the very first one, Daggerfall, came out, and I've played them with Kevin, and we've replayed them, and like we just finished up Skyrim not that long ago, and so like I'm real particular about that world because it has very specific associations for me. Again, it's another world that I've been in or spent time in for, wow, like over a decade now. I don't even remember when the first Daggerfall came out. Like it was over a decade ago at least. But anyway, so like I'm real particular about it because like it's just, this is not that world for me. I do actually like this deck. I mean, I know we make fun of lazy pips, but like it actually reads really well for me. It's very clear, and I do actually quite enjoy working with it, but it's just not a Skyrim deck. Like it's, besides the logo on the back, right? It doesn't feel like it's taking me into that world like the rest of the decks are. So then I started thinking about what deck in my collection does feel like it exists in the Skyrim world. And it's so funny because I pulled out the Runic Tarot here, which is a deck I'm actually working with this month. And even though like there is nothing to do with like, well, I mean, I do feel like Elder Scrolls has a little bit of influence from some of the Norse mythology as well as Celtic. And like, I feel like all of that is kind of pulled into it. But this feels more like the world that we actually experience in the game. Dark forests, big valleys, mountain ranges, like fire spewing lava areas. These characters look like the characters that you see in the game, right? And it feels like this exists more in that world. It's a little bit more gritty. It's darker. Like this just isn't like, it's just not like, this is a huge difference, right? This is just not the same. It's just a totally different kind of a vibe with this. I feel like if I put this next to the Heavenly Blooms in relation to the Final Fantasy, like this doesn't even come close to holding a candle to that beautiful deck. But this does not feel like it's in that world. And so like, yeah, this is me being like super nitpicky because again, these are video games that I have spent a tremendous amount of time in, have been like a huge part of my relationship actually with my husband because we play games together. It's been a huge part of relationship with friends because we play games with our friends. And like, so these things become really important to me. And like, it's kind of silly, but it is what it is. And this to me, even though like, again, I don't work with it, you know, same as the modern spellcasters, right? I don't work with it as if it's a Elder Scrolls deck. I'm definitely working with it as a runic tarot, pulling in rune associations and things like that, which I'll talk about more later on. But it does feel like it exists in the landscape of Skyrim, of Elder Scrolls. This is what the world looks like. It's kind of medieval. It's kind of gritty. There are some places that are a bit more like this, that are, you know, bright and happy, and you'll find, you know, lovely little characters that you come into contact with. But a lot of it's really like kind of confrontational because like it's a fighting game, right? You're going to go out and you do quests and you fight to, well, in the latest one, you're like fighting, I can't remember what the overall storyline because we played it for so long because it's an open world and you can just kind of go and do forever. We did finally finish the main storyline and there was like things with dragons and stuff. But anyway, this feels like it exists within that world. This is the Skyrim world to me. If I was to pick a deck that I currently have in my collection, it would be this one. It would not be the actual Skyrim Tarot, but I do keep the actual Skyrim Tarot because again, it is a deck that I really do kind of have a good time using. It's kind of a straightforward, no-nonsense sort of reader for me, which is kind of funny, and I do like the artwork. It's not that I am against this artwork. I do think it's pretty cool. I really like the suit associations. I do like that it's a pip deck. I mean, yes, could we have gotten a little bit more creative with our pips? Sure. The Horror Tarot is also a pip deck, but there's a big difference between the way those pips are illustrated and these pips are illustrated. You know, as everybody calls them, they're lazy pips, but it does actually read quite well for me. So I do keep it, and that is why I keep it, even though it doesn't really exist in the Skyrim realm for me. But technically, it is a deck based on a video game. So there you go. That's a little mini collection of decks that I personally relate to video games. Again, most of these decks are not meant to specifically relate to a video game. However, I just have, because of the way the art is drawn or the world is depicted, they just remind me of the time that I've spent in that world. So I thought it would just be fun to kind of put together this little mini collection and look at all the decks that I do actually associate in some way, shape, or form to a video game. So I would love to know if you have any like gamer style decks or any decks that you feel that do relate to a particular video game if you play them, and what decks you have in your collection that you might relate to those. So please feel free to share with me in the comments below. As always, you'll find links for everything I've shown here in the description box of this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to sharing with you again soon.